Well, Chris Doyle is a commentator on Middle East affairs and the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. He joins us live from London. Good to have you with us. So let's just remind ourselves of the timeline. These talks collapsed on Sunday with a very negative tone from the US officials, from the vice president. Very positive tone now, just a few days later. How do we explain this turnaround? Has there been some substantial change in positions of either side?
To say that there's been a ton of progress and to juxtapose that with what Vice President Vance said on leaving Islamabad, I mean, it's like two different worlds. There hasn't, on the outside that we know of, been any great progress. But I think it does reveal that the Trump administration really does want to get to a deal. It does not want to see a reemergence of a conflict in which it would not have that exit that it so craves. It wants to get this done. I think the tension will be between the desire to get the grand deal that J.D. Vance referred to, as opposed to build on the ceasefire so they can get the Strait of Hormuz open. Do they want to wait for the grand deal, keep that strait closed with all the impact it's having on the global economy, on it, US's allies, as well, of course, as Iran itself? And Iran, the Iranian leadership, also has been talking consistently about getting a proper deal, one that ensures that it's not going to be bombed in a few months' time. It wants to see an end to all of that, as indeed do the Gulf states. So at that level, there's agreement. It's everything else that will require considerable, dynamic, creative, disciplined diplomacy, something that has been thus far rather absent.
Chris, from what we've understood has been reported, one of the major stumbling blocks was the issue of uranium enrichment. Do we have any reason to believe? We've seen the Iranians have been pretty consistent on demanding that that is their right, that they will not give up. Do we have any reason to believe that the Americans are going to be more flexible on that?
Well, interesting, the rumor has it that the Americans are seeking Iran to have a moratorium on enriching uranium for 20 years. So that is at least accepting that Iran has a right to enrich. It's not saying you will never be allowed to enrich uranium. So that means it now is a question of trying to negotiate between the 5 years that Iran insists upon and the 20 years that is the Trump administration position. Well, can we broker a compromise on that? I think that's conceivable.
So, Chris, I'm sorry to jump in, but then why didn't this happen? What, again, I come back to the idea that everything collapsed in flames on a Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, 3 days later, suddenly compromise is possible on this issue. I mean, it leaves you again scratching your head saying, why?
We've all been scratching our heads pretty much every day of this war. I think that it was unlikely, though, that the two sides who aren't used to engaging with each other, certainly not at that level, Vice President, Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, were not going to agree at the first time of asking. That would have looked too easy. Both sides need to appear as if they're being tough. So it may be a question really of the psychology of this all, that they will need to go through several rounds in order to appear as if this has been thrashed out, that both sides have made the necessary concessions. Of course, the longer that the ceasefire continues, the pressure still builds because of all the economic issues that prevail, both for Iran, US, and its allies. So the two sides, the clock is ticking for them. They've got to deliver sooner rather than later.
One thing that is perhaps different going in is now we have this US blockade being imposed around the Straits of Hormuz. Do we know how much of an effective difference that makes? How to what extent even that this blockade is really working, given that CENTCOM haven't defined a maritime boundary for where is the line that the blockade begins and ends, right? So how do we even know, just because ships, there have been reports of ships going in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, how do we know if it's crossing the so-called line of the blockade?
It's a very good question. There are reports that some ships, certain reports said 6 had turned around and didn't go through, but there are also other reports saying that other ships have made it through that strait. So how effective is this American blockade? I think this is all about trying to put pressure on Iran. It's all about also President Trump looking tough, as if he's not caving in. So is this for posturing or is it for real? In theory, the position of the American administration is this is to put economic pressure on Iran to demonstrate that they too will be paying an economic price, but also to its Asian customers, those who rely so heavily on Iranian energy, like China, but also other countries. But that is also risking the United States antagonizing some of its allies in Southeast Asia. The best thing that can happen is that they get back to that negotiating table with revised ideas, creative thinking, because I don't think that history shows that pressuring the Iranian regime typically bears a lot of fruit.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks so much for your analysis. That's Chris Doyle, commentator on Middle East affairs and director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding, joining us from London.